Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast.
All right, RJ, as we kick off this episode of the Deep Dive, last one of January, last as it comes to an end, why don't we talk about things we'll never do again? Specifically, things you'll never do again. Maybe when it comes to doubting certain people. Athletes, perhaps.
Athletes named Joe, perhaps.
Perhaps,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. We'll start off the podcast with this. I was wrong, and you were right. The Cincinnati Bengals are legit. They are for real. And they are going to the Super Bowl. Congrats, Dylan.
Yes. Thank you. They are legit, and it's gonna be such a nightmare watching Joe Burrow run away from Von Miller and Aaron Donald and whatever four-man pressure the Rams throw his way. That'll be more than enough to get after him. It's gonna be a fun time. I'm excited to see Jamar Chase versus Jalen Ramsey, though. I think that'll be fun.
Yeah, no, that's going to be a great matchup, and I'm just going to be an overall, fun Super Bowl and happening down there in Southern California, around you.
Yeah, look the tickets. No way. You
don't have like $5,000 just to shell out for one game.
No. It's already up to 8. Once like the Rams thing really kicked in, like it's just
I should have bought right then.
I know.
Profits you could afford it.
Exactly. As with so many investments, RJ, I could have made money if I had capital.
That's always the sticking point, huh?
It is. All right, so this week we've got we'll mention injuries. We don't really have updates on the injuries, unfortunately. And then we'll go through, the Kraken games this week. We had some interesting ones, most of which ended poorly. And then we're going to get into the real meat of today's podcast, which is our Ron Francis, his time as GM in Carolina deep dive. Really excited to talk about that, all the trades he made, all the drafts that he was in charge of, all that stuff. Should be a lot of fun. All right, RJ, I mentioned it. We're going to start there. Any updates on Yarncroke or Kuhlman?
Not really. I mean, Yarncroke, we did get a little bit of clarity after last game. Hackstall said that it was an injury that was, from a previous game. Probably reading between the lines, that means the Pittsburgh game. He did take warm-ups, and that's why he was such a late scratch. He took warm-ups and then just kind of decided no, he couldn't go. He didn't feel good enough. So hopefully that means it's not too bad for him. If he was able to take warm-ups, but yeah, not a good sign that he didn't play, obviously. And then Carson Kuhlman slamming into the boards, hand, wrist, shoulder, whatever you want to call it, did not look good. No update on him yet. We'll probably get one before the next game, tomorrow against Boston.
Yeah, it's, obviously hoping both are okay. Both have been playing really well of late. Really, everybody seems to have liked what Kuhlman's brought to the lineup. It's going to be unfortunate missing him. And then obviously Yarncroke really for like the last month he's
been on fire.
Yeah, he just turned it on. He's been doing everything for this team. So couple decent sized losses there for the Kraken. Thankfully they have depth. They can try to survive these. It's just brutal when you're already missing Alexiak, Susie, all those guys. Hey, got Morgan Geekie back though.
Yep. No, that's good. I mean, it's good to see him back in the lineup. He was there. It's just a healthy scratch.
Yeah, I know.
But I want to, I guess, if you have to look for a silver lining in these injuries, really, it's just not good. But at least some of these, lineup controversies are kind of sorting themselves out, where it's just, the healthy guys are in, and especially on defense with Susie and Alexiak out. There's always the, why is Flurry or Borgen or whoever it is, a scratch? Come on, and it's just this unfortunate numbers game. But now, if you're healthy, you're in.
Exactly. Maybe not, the position Hackstall wants to be in, but it's
no, of course not.
Yeah. But it does make things easy. All right, so kicking off the week of Kraken hockey, we had that game against the Predators. Coming off the big upset over the Florida Panthers, Kraken, we were back on top, world beaters. We could do this against anybody except UC Saros.
I mean, it's one of those games where, again, you play well. I think we all thought the Kraken
Mm-hmm.
played pretty well, but you kind of run up against the unfortunate reality that even some nights when you're on your game and you feel like you're doing the right things, you don't always get the 2 points.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's felt like such a struggle for the Kraken just to be on their game. It almost feels like when they are, it's an automatic win, given how we've kind of been conditioned to look at that. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes you run into a good goalie. Sometimes the bounces don't go your way, and that's what it is.
Yeah, and that's very much what it was in this one. Theme of the week: Kraken getting goals from McCann and Adam Larson. that's, that's really what this week is known for. Um, just the power play. I mean, I talked about it last week on the podcast, going through all those games, all of the missed power play opportunities. I feel like this was another game where that really, ends up biting them. Is just you got 4 power play opportunities, you converted one. That was awesome. I believe it was the 5-on-3 though. Like you kind of have to do it in that situation. It's just I feel like a lot of these games they've been very much in them until late, and then it's one of those if you had either along the way or late in the game capitalized on a power play opportunity, everything's different. And instead it's just Kraken came out, they were playing well, and then just as this game went on, it just felt like they were getting more and more defeated by what this Nashville team was able to do.
Yeah, it was just kind of grinding them down, and you got the sense, yeah, okay, we're not going to get this one done tonight.
Yeah. Grubauer, I thought he played a good game. Hackstall was maybe a little bit different. Maybe that was just him, trying to get him psyched back up. Interesting comments from him. He did have that leaky one that was reminiscent of old school Grubauer.
Yeah, at the end of the first, and I know
Mm-hmm.
Haxtell didn't like the timing of that as well.
Yeah, and why would you?
Yeah.
But moving on, started the road trip, head out east, take on the Penguins, and lo and behold, Kraken get a win.
Yes, an impressive one at that too. I mean, the effort to go toe to toe with such a good team. Yeah, Pittsburgh hadn't lost at home since November.
Mm-hmm.
This was a team that just did not lose in their own building, and the Kraken hung with them for a full 60 minutes of really tough hockey too.
Mm-hmm.
You had to stay structured any single lapse at all, and you're going to pay for it. And they didn't. They stuck with it the whole time.
Yeah, and really, this is very, very much a game on paper in which the Kraken probably should not have won. Not a lot of power play opportunities. Penguins 1 for 2. Kraken again went 0-2 on the power play. Only 37% face-off percentage for the Kraken. Very much not good. But they just grinded out this game. Very much, style of game we thought the Kraken would play before the season started. Seemed the kind of game that their team was built for. Grubauer getting it done. Penguins get only 1 goal. Malkin shot off the power play. What are you going to do against this team, really? But for the most part, there was only maybe like 3 minutes this whole game where the Penguins looked like the Penguins at home have looked this year. The Kraken did such a good job of disrupting what they wanted to do, disrupting zone entries, just doing everything, and then doing a good job of battling in front of Tristan Jarry and trying to take him out of the game.
Yeah, and ultimately they were rewarded with that McCann goal. The deflection
Mm-hmm.
in front takes the goalie completely out of it.
Mm-hmm, for sure. And then Adam Larson again, McCann and Larson. This is your offense this week. Gets it done in overtime. Boy, it does seem like their whole we're just gonna play keep away with the puck thing. Whenever we get to these 3-on-3 overtimes, that's just gonna be their thing from here on out. But you know what? It's working.
It is. They've got a plan. They're executing on it. I just love to see that, especially after the overtime woes earlier on in the season, where it just felt like there was no plan, there was no execution on whatever plan there might be. They've really put it together and improved that area of their game.
For sure, for sure. It's interesting because generally I'm in favor of being aggressive in any sport at any time. Like I just think it's one of those things like you have to put pressure on the other team if you want to break them. If you play it safe, you're gonna just kind of cost yourself there. But I can't argue with the results of what their whole thing is. I get it. If you know yes, we might not be doing too much because we're holding on to it and really making sure we don't turn over the puck. But the bottom line is, as long as they don't have the puck, they can't win. Like, there is
Yep.
logic there. It'll be interesting to see how long that lasts. But for now, it seems to be working. So I say stick with it.
Yep. Absolutely.
All right. And then we get to yesterday's game. Just that, what a heartbreaker, RJ.
Oh man, it happened again. I don't know what to say about this. And it's tough because you look, they didn't play terribly after. I mean, okay, they tie the game, with
Mm-hmm.
about a minute to go. They didn't play terribly after that.
Mm-mm.
It's a tough play off a face off. Obviously, there's the Sheehan interference, that was much talked about after the game, but that I still think usually doesn't get called at that
No,
juncture of the game.
no way
It's
they're calling
so
that.
hard to get a call. And then, it's not even, a lapse from Grubauer or whatever, just that shot from Keandre Miller. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what a shot.
Yeah, it found its way through all the traffic. It was perfectly placed. Unbelievable shot from Keandre Miller, somebody that we talked up during the game when we were doing our Patreon exclusive live commentary. Thanks again to everybody who joined us for that. It was just this one that was destined to go in and win this game for the Rangers, and it's just like, why? It felt like destiny was just on our side. We get Gore to tie up this game after battling for that for so long, and really it not looking like it was going to happen at all. Like, this
Right.
Kraken team did not. You'll look at the shots on goal total. It's 42-24 in favor of the Kraken, but that does not tell the story of this game at all, in my opinion. Again, power play, horrendous. 1 for 5, with that one being you're on the power play and you have the goalie pulled, so it's 6-on-4. Like, again, the only way this team could score on the power play is with a 2-man advantage. It's ridiculous. Just, I don't know. I thought the defense had been looking really, really good for the Kraken, playing well in front of Grubauer. I felt like this game, though, some of that started to erode.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, you could kind of see the cracks in the defensive structure, and Grubauer did a good job kind of plastering over those cracks and
Mm-hmm.
and making up for some things. You look at the Rangers' goals that just really kind of impossible to stop. The ones that did get by him, that great puck movement on the Rangers' power play for their first goal. I mean, that was gorgeous.
It
Uh,
was.
you'd like to see maybe that sort of thing every now and then from the Kraken, even though they don't really have that kind of 5-man unit the Rangers can put out there. Um, but yeah, I think the power play too. It's just kind of where we were around the start of the season, where there's no creativity left, there's no new looks or anything. It's something they really need to go in and reevaluate.
Yeah, for sure. And it's one of those. I felt like the defense did some good things. They did a good job of keeping Grubauer's sight lines open for the most part. Keandre Miller goal, I don't think he saw that one, but again, a lot going on there. But it just felt like, yes, not, obviously on the power play, the Rangers could do whatever they wanted, and it felt like at other times they could do that too. And it just, I want to see them be maybe a little bit more active getting into passing lanes. Like, you can kind of know where they're going to be. There's only so much you can do in one zone of a rink. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
there's only so many things. Offenses are pretty universal at this point. Like we talk a lot about the power play, right? Like, everybody runs the same power play these days. Like, there's not a lot of different stuff that teams are trying to do. So you should be able to just kind of work on at least getting sticks in these passing lanes, but sometimes
Right.
this
And
Kraken team.
the example I think of also is that one timer from Zibanejad that led to the Lafreniere goal right in front.
Mm-hmm.
They were feeding him all game from that spot. It's one of those things you kind of have to know where they're going with it. Now, if you're shorthanded, yeah, there's an extra guy out there.
Yeah,
Someone's going to be left uncovered, but I believe that one was at even strength.
it was.
And that's a passing lane that you kind of have to take away.
Exactly. And we saw that to some extent in the Pittsburgh game too. There were times where Pittsburgh was just able to set up 5-on-5 as though they had a power play, and just Kraken were powerless to stop it. But it was really because nobody was forcing the issue.
Mhm.
I want to, again, I like being aggressive. Maybe it's okay to be aggressive in some of these 5-on-5 instances where, you know, your guys are getting tired. it's okay to maybe push, try to force it out, try to get a turnover, try to make them just make a mistake, because you're not giving them the time and space to do exactly what they want. They'll make an aired pass, and next thing you know, you can win a puck battle for it and send it out. So that's what I want to see from this defense moving forward. Like in Grubauer still, I don't think that these games that they've lost have necessarily been because of him. Maybe he contributes more so in that Predators game than in the one yesterday, but I still feel like we have the Grubauer that we kind of were expecting all year long.
Yeah, if you get a full season of this, 50, 60 starts, whatever you want of this, you're fine.
Yes, yeah, you take it every day of the week. Looking ahead, RJ, got 2 more games. Boston, as you mentioned, tomorrow night. And on Wednesday, we get to finally play the Islanders. The game that is just destined to never happen, it seems like. So we finally get that game. And then we get the All-Star break where we get to enjoy seeing, Eberle and the other one. There is no other one.
The Kraken just have one All-Star.
Yeah, it's just Eberle. I was spacing because we were making such a big deal about Gio going. But then I remembered that didn't happen. That
vote for the last man in. Sorry, everyone.
Gosh, can't imagine why. Yeah, so we get to watch Eberle. We get to watch everybody else. It should be fun. Looking forward to it. Certainly looking forward to the skills comp anyway.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that'll be fun. And hey, there's another skills competition where we might get to see more than just Jordan Eberle of the Kraken players.
That is right. Why don't you tell everybody about it?
Yep. So the Kraken announced the other day they're going to have a super skills showcase event that's going to be on Saturday, February 12th from 3 to 4:30 p.m. at Climate Pledge Arena. And I'm just going to read the release from it because this is what we know. This is a one-of-a-kind event where fans will be able to watch Kraken players compete against one another in a series of unique skills challenges that will show off their speed, accuracy, strength, and chirping abilities. This includes finding out who is our fastest skater, who can juggle a puck on their stick the longest, and who has the most accurate shot. We will also showcase our broadcast crew, who will be live from the benches. Fans can expect special celebrity guests, contests, giveaways, and more. We're excited to give fans an opportunity to see our team in a different light. So actually, tickets just went on sale this morning, the 31st at 10 a.m., so about an hour ago as we record this. And tickets are priced at just $10 with proceeds benefiting the One Roof Foundation. So I think this is going to be an awesome event. I love that the Kraken decided to do this.
Yeah, we've talked about this on some of the post-game lives. Why doesn't every team do this every year? Like, it's so obvious to me.
Right. It's this perfect event to show off your player's personality, the skills. I mean, it's the ultimate kind of fan outreach event too. I mean, and I'm so glad the Kraken, treated it the way they did as far as making tickets only $10, goes to charity. I could see some teams, that would just make this, it's a season ticket holders event or something, where, just closed event, keep our season ticket holders happy and a fun thing like that. But it's not what you want to do with something like this. This is the perfect thing to get people into the sport. And, for fans who already enjoy it to really, kind of get to see the players up close, their personalities, their skills, all of that. So I'm glad they made it as accessible as they have. I'm just happy with how they've executed so far on it.
Yeah, and it should be a lot of fun. I'm very curious about this whole chirping thing. Like, do they just mean like, everybody's going to be mic'd up, or are we going to have like, either some sort of debate or Yo Mama contest or what's going on? I know, talk about a blast from the past, right? Interesting to see how that goes, and wondering if, Brandon Tanev is going to be one of these celebrity guests for some sort of chirping event.
He must be. Certainly if there's a chirping event. I mean, that would be a huge error to not have him involved.
Yes,
if there was a dedicated event for chirping, because he's got to be the front runner.
Agreed. That one, it's going to be amazing. Again, so happy that they're doing it. This should be a standard thing forever. That not only the Kraken, every team should do, because as we've talked about, All-Star game, it's all right. It's fine. It's cool. Whatever. All-star skills comp, that's where it's at. That's what everyone has always seemed to care about more. It's just so much more fun. You get to see these guys be humans and have fun and be around
Mm-hmm.
each other and see the best in the game doing fun, wacky stuff in, breakaway challenges and stuff. It's just so much
Yeah,
better. So definitely happy that the Kraken are doing this and giving all the fans, like, it's the ultimate form of fan outreach, really.
it is. It absolutely is. And I remember watching, the skills competitions growing up for the NHL ones and just kind of looking like, okay,
Hmm.
where are the players on my favorite team, right? Just wanted to
Yep.
watch them the whole time because I wanted to see them. It's going to be all Kraken.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to see that.
Yes. All right. Getting into the heart of the podcast, RJ.
Here we
Ron
go.
Francis as GM. What's his history pre-Kraken? Well, it's a 4-ish year stint in Carolina, of course. Now, when we decided to look at this, his management career with the Hurricanes technically goes longer. It goes back to June of 2011 when he was director of hockey ops. We're gonna focus specifically on when he was GM as well. Named GM. I just think that way it kind of cuts down on the overall time frame and it gives us a little bit more of an accurate view of what he would do with the Kraken and what he's been
Exactly.
doing
It's
and
the
what he's
same job.
trying to do. Yes, because it's literally the same job. So really looking at 2014 through the end of the 2018 season, but before the 2018 draft, because he
Hmm.
was not around for that one. He was relieved of duty before that, and then obviously a year later hired by the Kraken in 2019. So RJ, what do you want to focus on first? Do we want to focus on draft classes first? Do we want to focus on trades with, certainly an emphasis on trade deadlines, given that's really what I think everybody's looking forward to right now?
I think here, let's start with the drafts because I think
Okay.
that's an area where Francis has probably kind of emphasized the drafting and developing.
Hmm.
Certainly, it's kind of what's been sold, to us as the way that this team is going to be built. So I think we should start with that.
Okay. Well, looking back at his first draft class as general manager, you look at the 2014 draft. Instantly, you see a pretty familiar name up top. Their first round pick, seventh overall, Hayden Flurry.
Yep. I mean, that's first pick there in his tenure as GM. And it's a reason that Flurry's name was also kind of linked to the Kraken when it was, thought that he might be available. Now, as a seventh overall pick, probably not the result you want. Still a fine hockey player.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, thoughts on that one, Dylan?
I, you know, I feel like a broken record at this point with Hayden Flurry. I love the whole, the shots, all that stuff, all of his offensive elements. Felt like the rest never came to be, though. Like, it just felt like it was, I don't know, he never came together as as a defensive prospect. Obviously, Carolina's had this stack system for a long time. We're going to be talking about another one of these guys, Jake Bean, very shortly,
Mm-hmm.
where it's just they have no ability to just break this roster. They have so many good players. That being said, there was opportunity, and Hayden Fleury never quite seized it. And we're seeing it somewhat here with Seattle too, right? Like, if not for the injuries, he's been someone who's been scratched a lot this year by Hackstall and the coaching staff. So I don't know. I see what they were going for in 2014 when you draft him. Big kid, 6'3", 200 plus. Like I said, he had an amazing shot, tore up things in Red Deer, but I don't know. If you look at the draft as a whole, at some of the guys taken, right behind him, there were better players available. Maybe not
Right.
defensemen, but better players.
That's the thing. You look at the next two picks. You got William Nylander and Nikolai Ehlers. Both of them turned out to be very good forwards, which is interesting though because there aren't a whole lot of defensemen at this point in that draft class that are kind of first round ready. You've got Hayden Flurry there at 7, Julius Honka at 14, Travis Sanheim 17,
Hmm.
Tony DeAngelo at 19, but then that's it for the first round.
Right.
So a very defense light draft class, and you wonder if maybe he might be looking for a position there. We'll see if we can if identify that as a theme or not. Drafting for position.
Yeah, it is interesting because there is a lot of defensemen that 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 are taken by Ron Francis, as we will find out. Now, I love this pick in the second round. Alex Nedeljkovic, goaltender, obviously came on for Carolina in a big way last season. It took him a while, very much like a lot of goaltenders we've talked about throughout this season, RJ. Draft him, fairly high, second round, 37th overall. That's not nothing. Takes them several years though to develop. Some goalies just take longer to develop, so you don't necessarily see that payoff. I mean, really, you're talking about Carolina seeing that payoff last year in, 2020, 2021, after he was drafted in 2014. But that's just kind of the way things go for goaltenders sometimes. And but you know what? He showed up when they needed him last year, and now he's showing up for Detroit.
Yeah, I have no problem with that pick. I don't mind taking swings on a goalie from kind of the second to fourth round, especially if you can get one of the top goalie prospects in the draft. So yeah, no, I think that's a fine pick. I'm trying to look at the goalies that year. Yeah, that was the third goalie pick of that draft, and yeah, just throw a dart at the dartboard, and that one landed.
Right, and I liked him a lot back in the day. Like I liked him playing at Plymouth and then later Flint. When that whole situation went down. And you look at the goaltenders taken all around there, because you have another one taken a couple picks later. Oh my gosh, I mean, you had you had 4 goaltenders taken in like 7 picks there. And I thought he's turned out to be, I mean, he's been the second best one of the bunch.
That's your Demko, of course, taking the pick right before, so he wasn't there, he wasn't available, but he's kind of in that range as far as taking a goalie. That's kind of when the run was there. So
yeah, I got no problem with that one. Going on into the third round, Warren Foegele, pretty good pick. Anytime you can get 240 games, a 240 game NHL career out of a third round pick, you're doing something right, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, gotta like that pick. One of those kind of sneaky good players you can find in the third round. And looking at the third round of that draft, again, he's probably the second best player out of that round, or at least second most games played behind Braden Point. Obviously, Braden Point has the edge, but to find a good player out of that is good.
For sure. So, then we start looking down. Really, the only other player of note, they had a pair of fourth round picks. Lucas Wallmark, probably the only other player of note for Carolina in this draft class. Again, someone who, he had a decent career. Not anywhere this year, though.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I remember he was someone that we were looking at with the Blackhawks last season as maybe a potential expansion draft pick, knowing that he had the Ron Francis connection. But hey, as a fourth rounder, like, that's fine. If you get a guy who play over 100 NHL games, you'll take it.
Yeah, and someone who contributed depth-wise for a handful of teams throughout his career. It's not bad. Again, certainly anything beyond the third round pick is an absolute dart throw, and I think you could probably at times put in the third round into there as well. So anytime you can hit on those, you're doing something good. So I like this 2014 draft. You got a lot of certainly games played by guys who contributed to Carolina's success over the last, half decade or so in there, as well as a familiar face in Hayden Flurry. Now, I will say, Carolina around this time, certainly heading into that 2014 draft and 2015 and stuff, was known as having one of the better scouting departments. And that was something that slowly eroded. I don't know that it would be because of Ron Francis. There's other things involved, I think, as well. But it was one of those things, and we're going to see as we start going through these draft classes that the draft classes, the hits, certainly the late round hits, start to go away a little bit as we go. And I do think that that's part of it. And I say that only because it is really important. Scouting departments are one of those places, you can try to do as much as you want via analytics, but you do need the, eyes on some of these players at times, and you need to make sure that you have people around who can, consolidate all those reports, all of those numbers, and really help out the GM, because GM's got a lot on his plate. It's not like he's watching tape of all these guys.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like yes, Ron Francis guy making these picks. Certainly, if you're picking top 5 like they were with Noah Hanfin in 2015, as we get into this next draft, Ron Francis very much involved in that. But beyond that, they're too busy to be watching tape on anybody. They're too busy to be doing all that. So it's very important to make sure you have a scouting department behind you, that you value their opinions, you trust their opinions, and you give them the tools to succeed, to help you out come draft day, because ultimately the draft is going to come down to you. It's
Right.
going to be
Now,
reflective of you.
yeah, no, you kind of got into that, and I'm glad you did, because you're a former scout. You kind of have some knowledge of how this sort of thing works. And I mean, is what I'm kind of hearing from that is that these later round picks, guys, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, that a lot of the times is more the scouts' purview. As far as finding those guys, those are the guys you advocate for after kind of seeing all year, versus maybe these top picks, kind of, anything in the first round, maybe that's more the GM, because he is keeping an eye on those top prospects, and ultimately those are the biggest decisions that he needs to make. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. That's exactly how it goes down. Again, you're talking anytime you're picking certainly top 10, you're factoring that person very much into your, that year or even the next year's plans as far as roster construction. So you really want to know, okay, where is this guy at? Can he come in right away? Are we going to want him to come in right away? What position is he? Just so that they can focus on planning around for that. A lot of the later round guys, you're also, very much like, hey, if they develop, awesome, we'll find a spot for them. They can kind of come in as a cheap option, whatever. But yes, first round picks, obviously high first round picks, very reflective of a GM's record. Tends to be one of those things that owners and fans all point to. If a team starts screwing those up, that's the quickest way to get fired as a general manager, really. So it's very important for the GMs there. But yes, later, once you start getting into the dart throw things, that's where, GM will basically be at a draft table and they'll look at everybody and be like, anybody got someone, like you got any feelings about somebody? And if it seems like the right spot, a scout will just, throw out a name and be like, yeah, I like this guy. And some GMs, that's all it takes. I've heard stories of some where it's just like, okay, they'll just run with that. Like they trust their guys. Others, they'll make make a case for them, and then they'll just take them. Because again, they don't know who to take in the 6th round. Really, nobody's looking at those guys if you're an NHL GM. So that is very much how it goes. Is they'll ask you, and if you've got the conviction to kind of stake your job on it and say like, no, I like what or at least this aspect of what this player can bring, they'll run with that, and those are the fun, exciting moments as a scout. That's for sure. All right, but I mentioned it. 2015, top 5 pick. What an absolutely loaded draft this was. And Carolina went with Noah Hanfin, who I think for a long time felt like maybe a little bit of a disappointment compared to some of the players picked, in the next 5 picks behind him. But really, he's carved out a nice role for himself in the NHL.
Yeah, he has, and it's kind of one of those safer roles, top 4 kind of roles. I mean, you look at the next defenseman draft, and it's Provorov, Zach Werenski, and so it's kind of tempting to look at that and kind of criticize the pick. But yeah, I think it's another case of okay, Dylan, I have a question for you. Do you think it's a case of kind of a safer pick of knowing that this guy's going to be around, or do you think it's maybe like a Hayden Flurry, kind of seeing the skills, going for an upside thing? I'm trying to remember what we were thinking of Noah Hanfin, because I remember we were at that draft.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what did you think of him as that pick?
Noah Hanfin was a very well-regarded, well-rounded defenseman. It was one of those, like, you maybe could question the high-end talent, but it was like he seemed like a surefire, he's going to be a top pairing guy. And that's why he was very much the clear number 1 defenseman to be taken. He had performed very well at Boston College, so you'd seen him against some higher level competition than maybe some of the other guys. It was just one of those things where he didn't have one skill that jumped off the board. It was just that he did everything so well. And so, looking back on it, maybe you would like one skill to look extremely good to make him a top 5 pick. But the bottom line is he's played 100 more games than Zach Werenski. Like, he's played more than anybody else taken in this draft, I think. If we break it down, he is the games played leader amongst this draft. So it's not like he was a bad pick at all. He's going to have a very long NHL career. It's just, I don't know that he ever lived up to the hype of being this kind of, top 2 surefire defenseman who's going to be there for like 20 years. It hasn't really happened for him, but he's going to be a top 4 guy who's going to play close to 20 years because he's just solid at everything. It's just he never developed past being super solid. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So, second round. That's the big hit in this draft class.
Yes, Sebastian Ajo, I mean, home run. There's just nothing else you could say about it. 365 points in 405 games played. An absolute stud, and he's a big reason why Carolina is the juggernaut that they are today.
Yeah, I mean, he's the clear 1C. You find your franchise center in the second round. That's very hard to do. I would like to kind of hear the story behind the scouting, that whole process with that pick, because I mean that's just a franchise changer.
It is, and if you look at it, that's only his second European pick. At this point, like he was not someone who targets Europe specifically. You look at the previous draft, that it's just Lucas Wallmark, obviously a 4th round pick. Here you've got Sebastian Ajo. Yeah, I don't know the story behind it, but an absolute amazing pick, an amazing steal. You look at some of the guys. I mean, this was an extremely deep draft class. Like, there's a lot of 2nd round picks who have played a lot of games, but Sebastian Ajo just jumps off the board here as being the best of them.
Yep, for sure.
With no real challenger either, like just an absolute steal. So that was a good pick for him. Then no 3rd round pick this year. Start looking, only one other player has played any time, and that's Nicholas Wahl.
Which he's carved out a decent role for himself in Vegas. I mean, good kind of supporting center. As a 4th rounder, I like that.
Exactly. I think that's going to be one of the themes, is finding these bottom 6 forwards to come in, like making sure you're hitting on those, which again, big deal as far as always having cheap guys you can plug into the lineup, know they're going to get the job done, they can fit into your system, they've grown up in it, you have familiarity with them. That is something that the good teams have, and the bad teams don't. So, you know what I mean? Like it does end up mattering. And real quick, I was wrong. They did have one more player from this draft class make it, and that is Steven Lawrence, who was their 7th round pick, 186th overall, 83 games played at the NHL level. Good for him. All with Carolina. Took him a couple years, but
yeah, I mean, he's there this season. It's anytime you can hit on a 7th rounder, get 80 games played at least. That's a win.
And again, bring in those cheap options when you need them. When you start running into salary cap issues, that's what they're there for. 2016, and you got 2 first-round picks. A lot of ammunition to work with. Picking 13th overall, they take Jake Bean. Now, we talked a ton about Jake Bean over this offseason, RJ.
Yes,
a lot of people are high on him. I'm not one of them. I think he's just Hayden Flurry 2.0. Fantastic shot, but the rest of the game just never has kind of coalesced around that. I don't know. He's finally cracking the lineup this year for Carolina, or for Columbus, excuse me. Like, he's finally found his way to the NHL, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think this pick we can probably be a little bit more critical of. At 13th overall, and yes, the skill certainly was there. But this was kind of a D heavy draft class, and you look at the next 2 D picks, at 14, the very next pick, Charlie McAvoy to Boston, and then 3 picks later, Jacob Chikrin to Arizona, and those are 2 very good defensemen, and 2 guys that certainly the Hurricanes and Ron Francis must have been looking at and considering, given who they ended up deciding to pick. So I think we can maybe call this one of a bit of a whiff there.
Yeah, this is where it feels like you can start seeing a pattern with Ron Francis. Obviously, he's taking defensemen. Okay, that is obvious. But like I said, Jake Bean felt a lot like Hayden Flurry. Doesn't have the size of Hayden Flurry, but it felt like, okay, this is very much in the era of Eric Carlson's doing a lot in Ottawa, and it felt very much like, okay, if you can find a defenseman who can, skate pretty good and can just score a bunch, potentially be a 20 goal scorer from the point, like that's the unicorn. You know what I mean? That's the guy you're searching for, and I think maybe Ron Francis kind of fell into that trap a little bit with a Jake Bean over those other guys that you mentioned, because those other guys, I mean, it's you can't argue with the results that they've had compared to Jake Bean. Like, it's just been obvious. I know Jake Bean, tougher path to the NHL just because of Carolina's depth on D, but I didn't understand the pick back when it happened. Don't really understand it now. Jake Bean is fine, but I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. But never fear, Carolina has another first round pick this year.
That is true. That is true. You get Julien Gauthier. You got him. Cool. Like, that didn't do much for Carolina by the time he really made it to the NHL. Shipped off to the Rangers, where he's been in and out of the lineup for them for several years now. Just one of those things. I remember him. It was one of those, again, felt like Ron Francis maybe falling into that trap of, you're looking for that big, bruising, powerful winger with size, gonna drive to the net, all that great stuff. Ooh, no, he's got the scoring touch. No, those guys, like, unless you're absolutely sure you have that guy, don't go searching for it in the first round.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's so rare to find those guys with size, and usually when they do have that scoring touch and it all does come together, they go higher than pick 21.
They do. Yeah, those are the guys that go first or second overall. Like,
Yeah.
when you have them and they are super legit like that, they are found much higher in the draft. I don't know. I mean, look, there wasn't like some home run hit really behind him through the rest of this first round. Like, there's some nice players in there, Brett Howden, Sam Steele, but it wasn't like there was a home run that you totally missed out on here. So you can't blame him there. But still, it just felt like one of those things. We've seen so many GMs get burned by it, and they just refuse to learn that lesson.
Yep. So I mean, we'll go looking forward and see if that's a lesson that he learned, or
Yes.
what you think from that.
Second round pick, 2016. Yanni Kukkonen.
I've heard Kokkonen.
Kokkonen. I'm looking at the pronunciation here on Hockey Reference. It's Kuokkunen.
Oh, okay.
Kuokkunen. Maybe that's wrong, but that's what it is here. Again, somebody who's starting to have, carve out a nice niche in the NHL for themselves, but not on Carolina. And this is the other thing that I've been noticing, which is, a lot of these guys, once Ron Francis left, they traded away a lot of his picks.
Yep. No, I mean, it was definitely kind of this new management. We're going to, have our guys, and maybe they just didn't necessarily believe in a lot of those Ron Francis picks.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's interesting because, it's kind of hard to argue with Carolina's results post Ron Francis. So what does that say? These guys clearly have value. They're playing in the NHL, so they're not bad players. Is it just that nobody felt they were going to fit into Brenda Moore's system? Maybe. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, that's a unique system that works very well for them. I don't know. I don't entirely know what to make of that. Because like I said, it'd be one thing if these guys all completely flamed out. But they're not. They are all NHL players. They're depth guys, don't get me wrong. But again, they're NHL players. These were hits in draft classes. I just don't know. I don't know what to make of that, really.
Yeah. It might say something as far as, because you always wonder how much of the Hurricanes' current success you can attribute to Ron Francis.
Mm-hmm.
And I certainly think there's a good amount, but it's interesting to see the kind of the mindset as far as maybe wanting to distance themselves from some of his picks.
Yeah, I think when we start getting into the trades, we might be able to find more. Because really, the only guy we've been able to bring up has been Sebastian Ajo.
Yep, and with how good he is, you can't
Yeah,
distance you've
no,
just got you have franchise center there.
no. I mean Nedeljkovic up to last year, but yeah, it's been
Mm-hmm.
interesting. Then we get into the last draft class, the last draft
Yes.
that Ron Francis had with the Carolina Hurricanes. You want to talk about our first pick here?
Yes, we've got Martin Nichas here, and he finally picks a forward in the first round.
Mm-hmm.
I'm amazed. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and you look, there was a run of 5 defensemen picked shortly after that in a row, who I guess maybe didn't feel all that good about, or maybe just wanted to go with a forward that year. But Nichas has actually been a pretty good pick. He's a good scoring winger. The kind of guy at 12 you got to be happy with. Nick Suzuki, the next pick, which maybe a little bit better, but
Mm-hmm.
and Josh Norris, the next forward after that, Robert Thomas. You had some good forwards around there,
Mm-hmm.
but overall, I think he's in that category and was still a fine pick.
Yeah, he's been fine. I mean, he's still with Carolina, so they've found value for him. I guess I don't know. It's hard because for me, he's never wowed me in the ways that again you feel like maybe he should. 6'3", 190. Kind of
Hmm.
I don't feel that when I watch him play all the time. But the numbers kind of speak for themselves. 41 points in 53 games last year, 22 points in 38 games for him this year. Not a huge goal scorer, probably never going to reach 20 goals in a season, or if he does, it'll be kind of one of those lucky years, right? Where all the bounces go your way. But he's not a bad player, and I do think that, Brindamore has found a nice role for him. It's just, yeah, you look at obviously Nick Suzuki being the next pick. Like maybe you don't have to do certain moves that Carolina has had to make in years past if you have Nick Suzuki in the system, uh, or Josh Norris. I don't
Hmm.
know. It's all if ands and all that nonsense. Did a good job to stay away from defensemen though, because none of those defensemen,
Exactly. I
turned
was
into
just looking at that
anything.
run of defense. And I'm like, good thing he did not
And
bite there.
and I will say, looking back at this draft class and remembering what this draft class was, really, all the guys went right before his pick. Like this is
Yep.
one of those drafts where there was 11 guys and they went the top 11, and then it was like, okay, Carolina at 12. This is where that next tier kind of comes in, and you're the person who's got to try to kick that off. It's the worst position to be in any draft.
Absolutely, it's really tough.
That being said, Michael Rasmussen should have never been in that top 11. Just gonna hammer that one home. Just saying.
Yep.
Again, don't draft for size. If the skill is not there, don't draft for size in that
Hmm.
high in the first round. But yeah, so interesting spot, and maybe that's one where you'd like to see Carolina move down. And maybe at the time they explored that, I obviously don't remember if that was they took that one down to the wire because they were trying to trade down. But that to me is those are the key moments to trade down is when, okay, the last of that tier is gone. Maybe there's 20 guys left in this tier. Trade down, accumulate more dart throws later on in the draft. So it'll be interesting to see if Ron Francis does that potentially this year. Looking at
Yep.
things, depending on how they finish out the year, where the lottery ends up, and everything, it'll be something to watch.
Yep. Now you were talking about Rasmussen and the drafting for size.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Kind of goes well into these next couple picks in
Mm-hmm.
this draft because there's a defenseman in there in the second round, but I see a couple big centers that he goes with in Eetu Lostarainen and Morgan Geekie.
Right. That is
Both
very
3, both centers.
that is very much something that he did. We can get to Morgan Geeky in a second, but you look at E2, and again, he's playing for a different team. He's not.
Yep.
He's not with Carolina anymore. Carolina. All these guys, they'll play 1 to 2 years with Carolina. They'll get to the NHL, get a cup of coffee, and then they're somewhere else. like they
Hmm.
prove that hey, they're an NHLer, and then they move them off. In this case, it's to Florida. Again, though, this seems like the appropriate place to draft someone like that. Okay, you're drafting a center with size. You obviously want that size, but you're not drafting them to be a franchise guy because the bottom line is they don't have the skills to be franchise guys. We're seeing that very much with Morgan Geeky, right? We wanted him to kind of explode this year and come out of his shell and be something that it's possible he's just not. It's possible he is just a depth center with size. Super valuable. You need those guys come playoff time. You need those guys as you're grinding out the regular season, dealing with injuries, all that stuff. He has enough skill that he can slide into your top six if you need him to cover up for, you know, a 2 week injury absence or something. But it's, you know, it's hard for someone to be the complete package when it comes to size and skill. That's why the few of them that there are, you know, the highest paid players in the NHL, and we all know their names, and that's just the case. But I like it's appropriate drafting these guys where they were drafted, because that's where you draft them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, there's a lot of similarities there. And, you know, Luostarinen, who's with Florida now, and Morgan Geekie, they've kind of got similar numbers, similar type of game.
Mm-hmm.
You can kind of see what type of player that that Ron Francis is kind of going after there.
Right, and this is kind of right around that time where Carolina they're trying to figure it out, figuring out what's going to be the thing that's going to kind of push us over the top here. You know what I mean? Like things were obviously this is the last draft class for Ron Francis, so you know he knew that they needed to get going. Yep. And you think, well, maybe if one of these guys can hit and come in and be the guy, you can get it done. And you know, kind of you can surprise on the upside, a la Sebastian Ajo. Didn't happen though. Just
yep.
Didn't happen. Still good though to get the NHL careers that you've gotten out of those 2 picks. It shows that, you know, you made some decent calls there though.
Yeah. So I mean, overall, like, what are we thinking? What are our main takeaways from these drafts?
That largely they're all right. Like
they're very okay.
Yeah, you're very good at finding some depth guys, getting guys that can play in the NHL. Light on star potential. Sebastian Ajo really being the only one, and that happened in one of the deepest draft classes of all time. And you know, potentially you got lucky there. But you're talking about having a 7th overall pick, a 5th overall pick, a 13th overall pick, a 12th overall pick. And in all 4 of those cases, not walking away with somebody that has really blossomed into being this like franchise cornerstone kind of guy.
Exactly. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that's kind of my biggest takeaway. And it's also kind of a personal preference thing, because I know there are a lot of people that kind of like drafting safe and going with guys like that. But I think you have to kind of swing for the fences with those picks and try and get a franchise cornerstone, try and get a superstar, because that's kind of the only place you're really going to get one. Mm-hmm. It's so hard to acquire one of those via the trade market. You're going to have to pay way more than you want to get one via the free agent market. Drafting is really the way to do that, kind of the only good way to do that. And you have to make those top picks count. And I think that's something that's certainly lacking with these draft classes.
Right. And don't, you know, it's fine to swing for the fences. Don't swing for the fences when it comes to size. It's not going to work.
Yeah, no, exactly.
It doesn't work. Which, you know, I think a couple of these were that. So that's why I bring that up, because that is Hayden Flurry. That's Nietzsche's. That's not so much Jake Bean. That one I felt like that was more appropriate. Like you saw offensive potential, you went for that. And it showed up a long time in Charlotte for them. Didn't branch out from there though.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on to his trade history, which, you know, arguably a little bit more relevant right now as we approach the trade deadline this year with the Kraken. Let's talk about it, RJ. That first ever trade, getting a 6th round pick for Jay Harrison. What'd you think? Was that the right move?
Oh yeah. Oh man, you could analyze this one for a week. You know, don't get me started here. Yeah, I think we'll probably just skip by that one.
Yes.
Quickly.
All right. You wanna kind of take the lead on the trades? So
yeah, absolutely.
For the draft. Cool.
The trades. This is kind of my favorite area, and I think an area where the GM really has the most impact. You talked about kind of the mixed impact of the GM versus the scouts and drafting and that sort of thing, where it's really kind of hard to pin the responsibility on the GM or the scouts. But trading, this is entirely the GM's area. This is, you know, kind of where he really, I mean, yes, he'll consult with scouts about who to acquire and whatnot, but this is the wheeling and dealing. This is the negotiating part. This is where great GMs separate themselves. So I'm excited to dive into this. And the first, kind of real task that Ron Francis had after being named GM was this 2015 trade deadline.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's going to be interesting to look at because, at this point, the Hurricanes had a 22-30-7 record, 51 points. They were second to last in the Eastern Conference. So they're clear sellers, not too unlike the position the Kraken might be in, come the trade deadline. So clear sellers. Let's see what Ron Francis did. And interesting little note here, the trade deadline was March 2nd, and he made 3 deals on the 25th, 25th, and 28th of February. So he got out a little bit ahead of the trade deadline. We'll see if that's something that he wants to do this year. And I know some GMs like to do that. But so the first of these deals, he trades away Jiri Tolusti, rental winger, 23 points in 52 games, kind of a depth winger. And he gets a 3rd round pick and a 5th round pick in return. So nice little bit of business, rental winger, get a couple picks. Not a ton to say. I mean, do you have anything to add on that one, Dylan?
Other than I just like it because it shows that you're willing to make any and all deals, right?
Exactly.
That's what this trade tells you, and to get a 3rd back for, as you say, a rental depth winger.
That's pretty good.
That's pretty good, yeah.
So yeah, nice little bit of business there for Ron Francis, but he was not done that day. He made a larger move, and he kind of had his biggest piece there, and that's defenseman Andrej Sekera. Good defenseman, not a superstar by any means, but top 4 guy. I remember he was kind of thought of as could be that last piece for a cup contending team. I think not unlike. I mean, he plays differently, and he's a very different defenseman. But as far as value comp wise, not unlike Mark Giordano this year.
That's probably true. I think the age thing.
Probably a little bit. The age helps.
The age,
but he was a rental.
Helps. He was a rental. He was a rental.
So probably a little bit more valuable.
Yeah, I just think
knowing how this trade turned out, also it kind of might color the opinion a little bit there because Sekera fell off a little bit afterward.
He did. I'm not judging it based on that. As far as just comping it to Gio, it's a 10-year age gap that you're talking. So
understand, yeah.
I think that plays the biggest role as far as, could we expect to see something like the package he got in Carolina? No, we're not.
Yeah. I do think there is a better comp with a later trade that we will get into here. But anyway, so the Hurricanes get the rights to Roland McCown and a 2016 first round pick. So the next year, first round pick from the Kings.
It was
so that is heavy competition there.
Yeah, and it had the potential to be 2015. There's conditions, all that kind of stuff.
Conditions and all that.
Yeah.
Yep. So it turned out to be 2016. But yeah, so it's a 2nd round pick because McCown was 50th overall in 2014, and then a 1st round pick. So that's a pretty good package, for the asset that you have there. And I remember at the time, the Kings, everyone kind of thought they gave up a lot, but hey, if this gets them another Stanley Cup, it's worth it.
Yeah.
And good on Ron Francis for kind of maximizing that.
Right.
Now
his contract was running up, right? Yeah, like he was last year. Yeah.
He was a rental. So
yeah, anytime you get a 1st round pick for a rental, you're set.
Yep, you've done your job for sure. So this trade, I know the Kings looking back at it was probably a bad trade for them. I think this might be one reason the GMs have kind of wised up a little bit, and maybe you couldn't get this return now for a similar asset. But yeah,
or that might be in part because of a trade made later on with the Kings.
Yep. So we'll get to that. But then 3 days later, Ron Francis does another trade, and I think this kind of falls into the category of like the Tolusti one, where he trades depth defenseman Tim Gleason to Washington for Jack Hillen and a 4th round pick in that year. Again, depth defenseman, you get a 4th round pick. Jack Hillen coming the other way. As far as why that player comes back, I found a quote from Francis at the time. This gives us a chance to take a look at Jack for the remainder of the season and continue to accumulate assets for a deep draft this summer. Yep. Sounds just like Ron Francis. And good on him getting extra draft picks. So he's got a 3rd, 4th, and a 5th, and a 1st. So nice bit of business there at that trade deadline.
Yeah, and again, clear out the depth guys that you don't necessarily want to hang on to. Like that's fine to do. Yes, you're taking them you're getting dart throws back, right? Fourth round pick. But as we saw Carolina under him, you're able to at least get depth guys back in return out of those kind of the fourth round picks and stuff. So, but you at least have the upside. You know what Tim Gleason is, and you know it's not necessarily what you want. So you might as well try again.
Exactly. So I think this would be a good blueprint for any kind of selling team deadline.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So moving on to that offseason, you've got starts here in late June with a couple goalie trades.
Mm-hmm.
And Ron Francis has just had some really bad luck with goalies, I will say, over the course of his GM career. And he even kind of alluded to that in an interview that he did with Seattle news station, where they asked him like, "You've had some pretty bad luck with goalies." Like, yeah, just trying to get one to stick here. But he gives up a 3rd round pick and a 7th round pick for Eddie Lack, and that's probably the best of these goalie trades. That one actually went okay. Lack was a serviceable goalie, fair price.
Yeah, you're not
And
giving
then,
up. You're not giving up too much for him, and you're taking on somebody that you think might have the potential to be a starter, but just hasn't been given the chance. You know what I
yep,
mean? And I think that that's an appropriate kind of an appropriate amount of assets to give up for that guy that you're taking a flyer on and saying, I think there's the potential here.
yeah, exactly. So I have no issue with that trade. And then on the same day, he trades away a goalie in the organization,
Mm-hmm.
Anton Hudobin,
Mm-hmm.
goalie who's still playing, and they get defenseman James Wisniewski in return. So thoughts on this deal?
I mean, it's an interesting one. You're adding to the blue line. Wisniewski, just an interesting player, interesting career overall.
For sure.
If you look at him, I think you're bringing a little bit of offense to your blue line there. You're looking maybe for help on the power play. I think it's fine. Obviously, you bring in Eddie Lack. You've got too many goalies now. You got to ship one out. You might as well do it for somebody who can help you somewhere else. So I kind of like that as a hockey trade, a 1-for-1.
Yeah, agreed. And it's, just kind of this flyer here. Wisniewski ended up only playing 1 game for the Hurricanes, but as we said,
Yeah.
Interesting career.
Yeah.
um, then in September, there's a trade with the Blackhawks here. The Hurricanes get Joachim Nordstrom, Chris Versteeg, and a 3rd round pick. The Blackhawks get Dennis Robertson, Jake Massey's signing rights, and a 5th round pick. So this is kind of one of those, capped up deals. The Blackhawks had some cap trouble. They needed to get rid of some guys.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see this as a bit of a theme here. But they get Chris Versteeg essentially just for the price of taking on his contract, and you get a pick upgrade as well.
Yeah, I mean that's good business. You're taking advantage of another team that is not in the best of bargaining positions. Would have liked to see maybe him take advantage of that in the expansion draft this offseason.
I was just gonna get there. Yeah,
But,
I think that's the kind of deal you would have liked to see more.
Mm-hmm. But
So
otherwise, it's hard to complain about doing something like that. It's not like Chris Versteeg was any slouch either. Like, wasn't gonna light the world on fire, but a pretty good player.
yeah, exactly, and good to know that Ron Francis can do this sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, yep. So now we go on to the 2016 trade deadline, which was February 29th. It didn't get too far, just 1 day out ahead of it, but Hurricanes had a 28, 26, and 10 record, 66 points, 12th in the Eastern Conference. So not quite in that playoff spot, but not quite last. A little better, but there's yeah.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, and you can tell, right? All these moves we've been talking about, they're adding NHL players. Like they clearly felt that entering that 2015 offseason, okay, let's try to remake ourselves. Let's make a push for it.
Exactly. And so that push had, kind of got middling results.
Mm-hmm.
But you see, what types of trades they made, you see that they kind of felt at the end of the day that they were sellers at that trade deadline. And the most notable of those trades is the Eric Stahl trade.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, trading away, longtime captain, franchise center, Eric Stahl to the New York Rangers. Now, it was the last year of Stahl's contract, kind of wanted to go somewhere he knew he could, be competitive and be in the playoffs. A really tough deal for Ron Francis to make. Now, Stahl, 50% retained also on the contract. he only had 33 points in 63 games. He was definitely having a down year.
Mm-hmm.
After a knee injury, didn't quite look the same. And also, he reportedly had a no trade clause and only wanted to go to the Rangers to play with his brother Mark.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that kind of limits what you can do as a GM. But Ron Francis ultimately gets the deal done. He gets the rights to Alexei Sarala and a couple second-round picks. Sarala was a third-round pick, the year prior. So, prospect in a couple seconds. Kind of an underwhelming return for a player of Eric Stahl's caliber, even though he was having a down year. But it's just a tough trade to make, right, Dylan?
It is a pretty tough trade to make. That being said, Stahl was very much trending downward and fast. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you look at those previous 3 seasons, they are very big steps in the wrong direction. So maybe you're also looking at things and saying, okay, he has played a lot of hockey up until this point. Maybe the wheels are just starting to fall off here. And then, as you mentioned, can't be understated. We knew he was going to the Rangers. I remember that deadline. Like it was a foregone conclusion. That's the only option. So when you have next to no bargaining power, it's hard to judge.
Yeah, you get what you can get.
Mm-hmm.
So he did make another deal that day, and that is actually flipping Chris Versteeg, who we talked about earlier, getting from the Blackhawks.
Mm-hmm.
He goes to the LA Kings, doing some more business with the Kings. And Carolina gets Valentin Zykov
Mm-hmm.
and a conditional fifth. The condition was not met, so it just turned out to be Zykov. Zykov was a second-round pick 3 years earlier in
Mm-hmm.
2013. This prospect that maybe needed a change of scenery. Um, I mean, I guess the notable thing is that he kind of went with prospect over a pick. He tried to identify a prospect that he might like. It didn't pan out, but it's a decision there, right? You could have asked for a draft pick, I would think.
It is, but it makes sense because if you look at the, I don't want to say long career of Valentin Zykov, but it is kind of a long career. Very high second round pick, somebody that had a ton of scoring potential, and somebody that many teams tried to make work. Like there was a lot there. I remember I loved this guy, going back to the 2013 draft. Everything, like it all seemed like it was there. It never ended up working. Ultimately, Carolina tried him in the NHL. Edmonton, Vegas is kind of where he, was his last shot and couldn't quite make things stick. But you're talking about then 4 total teams and organizations trying to make this guy work. There was a lot there to like, just never kind of came together for him. But I like that kind
Yeah,
of
I like
flipping an
taking a shot.
asset. You took off the Blackhawks' hands. Things aren't working out this season. Go ahead, flip that guy, and take a shot on somebody that you think has potential top 6 potential.
Yeah, that's good value.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next day, February 29th, he trades away John Michael Lyles, kind of a third pairing depth defenseman, offensive side to him. And he gets back Anthony Kamara. Not really much to say on him,
Mm-hmm.
and a third and a fifth round pick. You got 2 picks for a depth defenseman. Well done.
Mm-hmm.
So
Exactly, and that's the kind of thing that gives me hope for a Giordano trade this year potentially. Is
yeah,
he knows how to work, certainly at least the market on the blue line. Those are the trades so far that we could say
exactly.
feel okay, um, because that's at the end of the day. I mean, I remember there was so much talk about John Michael Lyles that trade deadline.
I
Like
know.
these are the names that people will all of a sudden start freaking out over, and they'll talk up and they'll build up to be some sort of difference maker in their minds come
It's just
trade
that last
deadline.
piece you need to win the Stanley Cup. That's all you need to
Yeah,
push it to the top.
yeah, and it's absolutely wild. So that's why I understand why people would look at things with Giordano and be like, no, nobody's going to give up any sort of decent draft pick for this old rental defenseman that clearly looks like is you know the end is near. But at the same time, I mean, good God, the amount of talk around guys like John Michael Lyles is just wild.
Yeah, we'll see that as we get close to the trade deadline. He also just made an AHL for AHL deal. We're not going to talk about that.
Yeah.
Um, so moving on to the 2016 offseason, we got June, and the Chris Versteeg trade was a little appetizer here,
Mm-hmm.
and now we get the main course of the those cap motivated deals. And I love this one. This is the kind of thing I was really hoping to see this past offseason. from Ron Francis. And this is the kind of deal where I thought, oh man, he's just going to kill it this year, with the expansion process and teams being cap strapped, because he takes on the Brian Bickle contract, the remainder of that, $4 million cap hit, and gets, and gives away a second and a third round pick, but he gets Teuvo Teravainen, who is a heck of a hockey player. And that's kind of using that cap space, leveraging that cap space that you have, to get a guy who, with the Hurricanes, just did really, really well. I mean, top season was 76 points. Like you can't just find those guys anywhere, and leverages his cap space to get a guy like that.
Yeah, and I think most importantly, ended up fitting exactly and perfectly into Brendan Moore's system in Carolina, as a guy who could be responsible on the wing as well as putting up points for you. He's just kind of turned into this really, really nice player for them. Obviously, we knew he was going to turn into a nice player. He'd shown flashes of that in Chicago beforehand, but just one of those guys that is, I don't want to say a total difference maker, but in a lot of ways is a difference maker. He's going to be someone who's going to give you 20 goals a season. He's going to be responsible both ways, and he can play with anybody. And I think that's one of the things you got to factor in too. Sometimes is you want to bring in guys that all right, I don't know exactly where they're going to go, but I know that it's going to work out somewhere. A lot of times you'll see guys bring in, whether it's prospects or guys at the trade deadline, and you're hoping it works out. But, and you can have a plan for it. But we've seen a lot of times, how many wingers have we seen brought in by teams? Okay, we're bringing in this guy to play with this center. And then they just have no chemistry. You know what I mean?
It's so hard to know.
It is.
Get that. But certain guys, just have that skill, have that ability. They're going to fit in somewhere, as you said.
Right. And Teravainen is one of those guys. So, yeah, you can't say enough about how great this trade was. And again, taking advantage of Chicago's position and, using your leverage.
Exactly. So got a couple more AHL deals, and then we go on to the 2017 trade deadline. So the trade deadline was March 1st, and he got out ahead of it again. Making a couple trades on the February 23rd and 28th. So Hurricanes had a 25-25-10 record, 60 points, second to last in the Eastern Conference again, Sellers again. So that's their position. And they made two trades. The first one, and maybe this is the better comp I was thinking for Giordano, is they trade away Ron Hainsey, veteran defenseman. He's 36. And another guy people viewed as maybe this is the last, piece to win a Stanley Cup. Turns out there might have been something to that. And he goes to Pittsburgh, the eventual Stanley Cup champion that year. And the Hurricanes get back in exchange Danny Cristo prospect and a second round pick.
Yeah, it is more comparable to Giordano. Hainsey, he helped Pittsburgh win a cup. You can't ask for more than that. But at the same time, again, this is why I think a first rounder is not out of the question for Giordano, because good God, the difference in name recognition between those two, right? Like, again, this is another example. Yeah. Trade deadline, prices get wacky really fast. And, if I could see if Francis plays it right and plays it kind of like his track record here at Carolina is, which is I'm going to try to get out in front of the deadline. If he gets out there and starts shopping Giordano 2 weeks ahead of the deadline and says, hey, look, you can take your chance on maybe one of those other guys, or you can take this deal right now and know you're getting this guy and have him for those couple extra games, maybe if it's a borderline playoff team, you can take advantage of that. But to get a second round pick out of that is incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ron Hainsey's a good defenseman. He was a great last piece, but he's never received a Norris vote.
Yeah, no.
Giordano, a Norris winner. It's the difference in name recognition is crazy there. And then another deal that I like, the other deal that he made was he trades Victor Stahlberg, depth winger, to Ottawa for a third round pick.
Yeah,
that's another good bit of business.
Yep, just more doing that and accumulating assets for guys that aren't going to be around long term. They're not necessarily doing too much for you. That's one thing that you do, and it'll be interesting to see how much of that there is this year for the Kraken. They've got a lot of those guys on deals, that are expiring, kind of depth guys. It's going to be interesting.
Yep. So then moving on to later that off season. So excuse me, we see a trade here that again, Ron Francis, bad luck with goalies.
Yeah.
We've got bringing in Scott Darling to be kind of the future in net for the Hurricanes, giving up a 3rd round pick. The price is fair for you're trying to get that goalie. You see with that and the Eddie Lack deal, kind of the caliber that he was going after, and you think maybe because these aren't these are guys you're taking a gamble on, right? These are 3rd round pick tier goalies that you're trying to gamble on. You wonder if after all of this, it just is like this season, like screw it, I'm just getting Grubauer. I know he's a top end guy. No more messing around with this. I hope they work out stuff with the goalies.
I think that's exactly what happened. I think he was like, okay, I can get Drieger. That's awesome. I feel like that's a good one. But again, that kind of fits in with a lot of these guys, right? Eddie Lack, Scott Darling, right? And that's why when Grubauer was available at a decent price, I think he pulled the trigger, even though they weren't planning on it, because he was just like, no, if I can get a sure thing, I'm going to get it. Little did we know Ron Francis just has some sort of, bad luck charm somewhere, in his office, on his person somewhere, that just renders all goalies terrible.
Yep. That's the only thing we can conclude at this point.
It's the number one takeaway from this whole deep dive into his history at Carolina.
Yep. So that off season, it's 2017. So you've got the Vegas Golden Knights coming in with the expansion draft. Hurricanes did pretty well. They gave a 5th round pick, just to have Vegas take someone who I don't think turned out to really do much. They did, because if you remember, Vegas took a whole bunch of defensemen, went and tried to flip some of them. The Hurricanes were interested in one. They gave up a 2nd round pick to get Trevor Van Riemsdyk. They got a 7th round pick back. But yeah, just kind of paying a little bit to Vegas there to get a defenseman. I don't know that TVR really turned out to be a 2nd round pick worthy defenseman. Maybe didn't identify the right guy there, but that's a trade that they made.
It was he was the guy that was available, and certainly at this point, if you've been paying attention, you've sensed a theme of them selling at the deadlines because the team's not going anywhere. I think again, Francis knows, okay, I'm starting to get onto the hot seat here. This team's got to make the playoffs.
For sure. I think he knows he needs to make some additions here because, yeah, the pressure is ratcheting up now as we get into 2017-2018 season. He also trades away Eddie Lack to the Flames because that didn't work out. He brought in his goalie, Darling. And then the final trade that we're going to cover here, he makes one more addition, from Vegas on July 4th, another guy that Vegas kind of flipped. He gets Marcus Kruger, the former Blackhawks center there, for a 5th round pick. Figure he's going to be, just a good bottom 6 center, defensively reliable, that kind of thing. So that's kind of his last addition there, going into the next season.
Yeah, and didn't save him.
Nope. So finally we head into the 2018 trade deadline, and didn't really do anything. I mean, they're 27, 25, and 10 record. 64 points, so they're 10th in the Eastern Conference. Couple spots out of the playoffs. They ended up not making the playoffs that year, by the way, but they're in it. And so, I found a post-trade deadline kind of media availability with Ron Francis as they're interviewing him, and it was very interesting to watch because they were asked, why didn't you do anything? And he said, we looked at some pieces to add, but the prices were pretty steep. We didn't feel like giving up a 1st round pick or some big asset for, to add a guy. But we also looked at moving pieces out for assets, but there wasn't really anything there either. So we just really didn't do anything. And you can tell that the pressure has kind of ratcheted up on him at this point in Carolina. There was a question about, what would you say to fans who think this team is just on a hamster wheel, just kind of going nowhere?
Such a brutal question.
I know. What do you say to that? I mean, he's like, well, there's progress in the AHL. We've got Jake Bean and Nietzsche in Charlotte doing really well. And, And the very next question they just throw at it, a lot of the fans think, pretty much all the goodwill has burned away. What do you have to say about that?
It's just
And
unbelievable.
yeah, and Francis just kind of looked defeated at that point in that media availability. It's just you could tell that the end was probably near if they did not, find a way to get into the playoffs,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't. And that's there it is. That's the end of the story.
Right. Well, really, that begs the question: should he have been more aggressive at that deadline? You're in 10th. You know things are bad. You know what the fans are thinking. All of that. That's the time to maybe just go all in, or is it? You know, I don't know. Do we give him the benefit of the doubt and say he was thinking of the franchise's long-term potential, and even if he wasn't going to be there, he wasn't going to screw him over just to try to save his own skin?
Well, there you go. I think you kind of made the arguments on both sides. I think if he was just concerned about his job and keeping his job, yeah, I think he takes a bigger swing because they were, within striking distance of the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
But I think at the end of the day, he didn't want to give up an asset and really damage the long-term future of the franchise. And I think you're seeing some of the benefits of that now, of him not doing that. Um, where yeah, it's a tough call to make as a GM because you might even know this is not a wise move here,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But it might be the only thing that can save my job. It's tough. So maybe there's an element of just wanting to do right by the franchise. Maybe there's an element of I think of that quote from Moneyball, the A's managers. I've got to manage in a way that I can explain in job interviews in the
Yes.
offseason. Maybe he had to do that, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's just not very Ken Holland of him. Say that.
Exactly.
Say that.
Yep.
Then last question. Let's say the Kraken are in that position next year. Kind of almost in the playoffs, couple points out, trade deadline. Do we want him to do anything different?
You know, no, I don't think so. I think he's got to stick by what the plan is. One, I think he'll have a little bit more job security, certainly if they're on the bubble.
Yes.
But also, yeah, I just don't think as good as it would be to get a playoff run for this team and everything. Um, you don't want to jeopardize the long-term future of the franchise. You certainly don't want to give up a first-round pick if that's what it's going to take to bring someone in who could be a difference maker. Maybe you add a depth guy, one of those like the Toulouse or John Michael Lyles trades with a third and a fifth, something to just get the fan base going where you're not giving up too much.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough to lose those picks, but it could be worth it. But yeah, I wouldn't want him to take an unnecessary big swing. And I trust that he wouldn't, given his history with the Hurricanes. Because if there's any time to do it, it's then.
I agree. I think that's where you'd see potentially a bigger trade happening, where you're utilizing cap space. Not necessarily of the caliber of Jack Eichel or something, but I think that's where you see maybe a trade for a pretty legit player, not a
Someone who
rental.
works for now and the
Yeah,
future. Yeah.
exactly. I think that's what happens then is he gets aggressive trade wise, but it'll be something more along those lines, which again I'd be in favor of as well. Interesting stuff though. I don't overall conclusion, do you have one? I
Um,
he's
you
pretty
know,
okay at drafting, but nothing
yep.
special. I don't know.
I didn't because before we looked into any of this stuff, I did not expect to come away more impressed with the trades than with the draft history.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I was going to like the drafting and I thought I was going to not like the trades.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just given from what I've seen, with him in Seattle. And it was actually the reverse of that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been the biggest surprise for me. I would like to see more of Carolina Ron Francis when making trades.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll see that at some point. And the drafting's just very okay. So I would like to see a little bit more aggressive, especially early on drafting. And I we may have seen that a little bit with Matty Beniers.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't go with one of those defensemen who is going to be a safe pick or anything because there were
Yeah.
some that were talked about.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see.
Yeah, no, I think the Beniers pick helps. Obviously, you're second overall. That's higher than anything he had in Carolina. Really, the only top 5 pick he had was the Noah Hanfin one. And like I said, at the time, Noah Hanfin was like the slam dunk.
Mm-hmm.
This guy's going to be a franchise defenseman kind of thing. Just nobody
Yeah.
could tell you why, which is, I guess, a little bit of a red flag. But everybody was like, no, he's going to be great. It's fine. He's awesome. So, it helps out. We'll obviously see where they're picking this year. Depending on where they pick, I've said it before. If it's kind of out of the top 5, I got no problem trading down. I've got no problem flipping that for a player that could maybe, a young player that could help out this team long term still, but you already have kind of a feel for who they are. And I think that there are guys out there that you can find that are in interesting situations with their current club that maybe the club would be willing to part with them for, a 7th overall, 12th overall kind of pick.
Yeah, agreed. So let's see some of that trade magic, Ron Francis.
Because I think
we know you have it in you.
Because I think we're going to start seeing some moves this offseason that show he's more in the 2017 offseason mode than the 2014-2015 offseason mode. Ron Francis from Carolina. That's just my opinion. But this podcast has gone on long enough. Thanks everybody for joining us for this episode of the Deep Dive. Hope that you enjoyed it. Watch it on YouTube. Let us know your comments down below. Does this increase your confidence in Ron Francis? You a little bit more worried now? Let us know how you feel about everything, because I'm very interested in that. And if you're listening on any of the podcast services, tweet at us. Let us know, because I am curious after looking at it, because I'm pretty mixed. I don't know that I'm leaning one direction or the other on it, how it makes me feel. So it's an interesting one. But other than that, fun week of Kraken hockey, and then the All-Star game, All-Star break. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you next time.